Space in the outer rim felt unnaturally quiet, the kind of silence that made even experienced pilots feel like something was breathing behind them, and as the small alien scout ship Rylos 17 drifted through the dying star system, every crew member sensed a strange tension building in the air, a tension that should not exist in an empty part of the galaxy. But tonight felt different because old legends were starting to feel real again. Legends about humans that the galaxy had buried long ago. Stories whispered in dark corners about a species that once shook star systems with their willpower and vanished without leaving even their ashes behind, leaving only fear and unanswered questions. And while most civilizations forgot these tales, the crew of Rylos 17 never imagined they would become the first witnesses in thousands of years to something connected to those ancient ghosts. Yet as their ship scanned the empty system, the first officer noticed a faint line on the radar, a soft, thin signal that should not exist. But before he could speak, the line split into 2, then 10, then dozens more appearing so fast that his throat tightened and his fingers trembled because it looked like a fleet signature but far too large, too organized, too perfect to belong to any known empire. And as the captain leaned in, the lines multiplied until the entire radar screen filled with shapes so massive that everyone in the room went silent, hearts beating loudly in their chests as they realized they were staring at something impossible, something that was not supposed to exist. And then one of the lines began pulsing with an old, long-forbidden code, a code that the captain recognized instantly even though he had hoped he would never see it again, because in his early academy years he once saw a secret file containing this exact pattern, the signature of a Terran military fleet, a human war code, and the moment the captain whispered, "This is human," the entire crew froze as if cold water had been poured over their skin, panic rising inside them because humans were myths now, extinct according to history, vanished according to science, and dead according to every empire's records. Yet somehow a human military signal was pulsing in front of them from a fleet so large that no species alive could even build it, and before they could react, the lights inside their ship flickered sharply, the engines groaned like a dying creature, communication channels collapsed one after another, and a suffocating heaviness filled the air as if invisible eyes were staring straight through the hull, watching them, judging them, deciding what to do with them. And then the unknown fleet, those massive shadowy shapes hidden beyond the radar, shifted direction and began moving toward Rylos 17 with slow, terrifying precision, not rushing, not chasing, simply approaching the scout ship the same way a predator approaches a small, helpless animal. And when the captain ordered the ship to retreat, the engines stuttered and fought to respond, but something was gripping their systems, something powerful enough to make their advanced technology feel like old rusted tools. And as the pilot tried to escape, every light in the ship shut off at once, plunging them into darkness so complete that the crew could hear their own breathing echo against the walls. And then a single dim emergency screen flickered on by itself, glowing with a cold blue light that made the room feel even smaller, and on that tiny screen appeared an ancient Terran emblem, sharp, triangular, with a burning star in its center. Something no one had seen for thousands of years. Something they had only heard about in horror stories meant to scare children into obeying rules. But now it was real, alive, right in front of them, and then words began to form on the screen in a language the crew could not read, but the auto-translation system whispered the meaning into the silent room with a soft, chilling voice, saying only 3 words, "Do not follow us." And the moment the message ended, the screen went black, the ship went cold, the engines died completely, and for several seconds the crew stood frozen, unable to speak or breathe, because they felt something enormous passing by their ship, not touching them but surrounding them. A silent force moving through space like a tide older than time itself, and when the darkness outside shifted, the crew saw giant shadows moving across the stars, massive triangular silhouettes drifting with a grace that no mechanical machine should have, larger than mountains, darker than the void, each one silently cutting through space without heat, without sound, without leaving any trace at all. And then, as suddenly as they appeared, the shapes vanished, bending space around them in a way that made even the captain gasp because it looked like they were not traveling through space but through something deeper, something beyond. And when the power slowly returned to Rylos 17 in weak flickers, the captain realized with a sinking feeling in his chest that the galaxy had been wrong this whole time, because humans did not die, they did not vanish, they did not fade into myths. They left, and whatever they found beyond the galaxy had changed them into something far more powerful, far more silent, far more terrifying, and now they were back, leaving only one message behind: do not follow them. A warning so simple yet filled with so much weight, that every crew member understood one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever humans were facing out there, whatever humans had become, it was something the galaxy was not ready to understand and should never try to confront, because tonight they had not just seen a fleet, they had seen a prophecy returning from the dark, and the universe would never be the same again. Galactic space was never truly quiet, yet after the incident with Rylos 17, a strange fear began spreading like cold smoke through every empire, because the scout ship's distress signal, what little of it survived, carried fragments of something that froze entire governments in seconds. A massive unknown fleet, a human signature, and a message that should not have existed in any timeline. And as the broken recording played again and again inside secret council chambers, leaders who once laughed at the idea of humans now sat in deep silence, unable to ignore the trembling in their own hands, while outside the meeting halls, across planets and star stations, rumors spread like wildfire, twisting into new forms with every whisper, with some saying the humans had returned as conquerors, others claiming they came as ghosts from another universe, and a few old species trembling because they remembered something their ancestors warned them centuries ago. If humans ever return, do not try to understand them, because understanding them always leads to disaster. And while fear grew across 10 star systems, the Council forced a communication blackout, erasing every public transmission, deleting every mention of the event, even silencing full planets by shutting down their networks. But the truth kept bleeding through cracks like an unstoppable flood, because Rylos 17 reported something no one had ever seen before. Ships the size of mountains moving like shadows, engines invisible yet powerful enough to crush a scout ship's systems without touching it. And as panic increased, the Council tried to reassure themselves by convincing each other that the fleet belonged to some hidden empire, maybe an old enemy returning, maybe a forgotten faction awakening. But when they analyzed the signal more closely and found the Terran military signature inside it, unchanged for thousands of years, their faces turned pale, their eyes hollow, because this was not the code of a dead species, it was the code of a species that chose silence, chose disappearance, chose to leave the galaxy by their own decision, not because they were defeated but because they were preparing for something else entirely. And this realization sent waves of cold dread through the council room, where the oldest diplomats suddenly understood why humans vanished so violently and so completely long ago. And while all this happened, thousands of alien citizens across star systems gathered in groups, staring at the dark skies above their worlds, remembering the stories there. Grandparents whispered, stories about humans who were brave enough to face dying stars, stubborn enough to fight ancient predators, and mad enough to challenge the galaxy itself. And those stories, once treated as myths, now felt like warnings written in fire. And in mining colonies, workers refused to go underground, believing humans had awakened something beneath the cosmic layers, while research stations shut down their telescopes because every time they pointed toward the direction of the unknown fleet, their screens glitched, sensors cracked, and power grids collapsed, as if something was pushing back, stopping them from seeing too much. And all these strange events forced the Council into an emergency session where the atmosphere felt thick with fear, because for the first time in centuries, every empire leader admitted they were powerless, their armies useless, and their centuries of knowledge meaningless before the rising shadow of a species they once underestimated. And as voices rose and fell inside the chamber, trying to argue, trying to deny, trying to blame each other, the old archiver, a frail alien with golden eyes, slowly stood up and shocked everyone by unlocking the deepest vault of the Council. A vault sealed since the last Great War, and inside that vault existed a single recording. One message stored by the last human commander before humanity vanished, a video that was never meant to be seen again, and when the archiver played it, the room fell into absolute silence as a human face appeared, worn, scarred, tired, but filled with a power no alien could match. And his voice echoed through the chamber like thunder rolling across a dead planet as he warned the galaxy that humans were not running, not hiding, but going somewhere far beyond their reach, because something was coming for the galaxy. Something ancient, something invisible, something bigger than the Council's imagination, and humans needed centuries to prepare for it, to fight it, to face it alone without risking other species. And when the human commander in the recording said, "If we return, it means the door has opened again," every alien leader felt their blood turn cold, because the fleet spotted by Rylos 17 was not returning in triumph. It was returning in desperation, returning as soldiers standing between the galaxy and an enemy no one could understand, and while the video played its final seconds showing a damaged galaxy map with strange dark zones bleeding outward. Like infection, the leaders knew they could not hide this reality forever, because fear was already spreading faster than any message they could control. And as the chamber lights dimmed, the oldest leader whispered the truth no one wanted to accept. Humans were not the danger, humans were the shield, and whatever caused their return was far worse than anything the galaxy had ever seen, forcing every leader to look at each other with dread in their eyes because for the first time in thousands of years, every powerful empire felt small, helpless, and blind before the storm that was beginning to rise from the cosmic horizon, leaving an unspoken question hanging heavy in the air. If the humans were this afraid, then what nightmare were they running from? Across the silent halls of the Galactic Council, fear moved like a cold shadow that refused to leave, and as the recording of the last human commander ended, the room felt heavier, almost suffocating, because every leader understood that the galaxy had been living in a fragile illusion, believing humans were gone, believing the danger had passed, believing history had closed its darkest chapter. But now the truth was staring straight into their souls. Humanity's disappearance had never been an escape, it had been a preparation. A long, silent war fought far away from every star the Council controlled, and the moment that realization settled, something deep and ancient woke inside the minds of the leaders, something they did not want to acknowledge, because if humans had returned with a fleet so massive and so silent that scanners collapsed by merely detecting them, then whatever lurked behind them was far beyond anything the galaxy had ever encountered. And while the chamber lights flickered gently, diplomats exchanged terrified glances, struggling to understand how humans, a species once known for reckless bravery and impossible victories, had turned into something so quiet, so calculated, so cold. And as the Council replayed the message again, hoping to find answers in the human commander's trembling voice, they noticed something they missed before. A map in the background filled with dark zones, shifting and growing like a spreading infection. Regions beyond the galaxy. Regions where physics bent and stars collapsed without warning, and suddenly one of the scientists gasped, realizing those dark zones aligned with hundreds of mysterious disappearances the Council had ignored for centuries. Disappearances, blamed on black holes or rogue dark matter storms. But now they understood that those events were not accidents. They were signs, warnings, footprints of something moving through the universe. Something that humanity had fought alone in the darkness. And as this truth spread through the room like a freezing wind, the leaders felt smaller than ever. Their armies useless, their strategies meaningless, their intelligence blind, and while panic trembled in their voices, the archiver explained in a shaky whisper that the recording had been hidden because the Council once believed revealing it would cause absolute chaos. But hiding it had only delayed the inevitable, because humans had predicted everything. The fear, the silence, the approaching darkness. And the moment they left the galaxy, they did it with full knowledge that one day they might have to return not as neighbors, not as allies, but as the first and last defense against a cosmic enemy that wanted more than worlds, more than resources, more than power, something that fed on existence itself. And as the chamber absorbed every horrifying implication, a crushing silence fell upon the leaders as they turned their eyes toward the massive council window, staring at the distant stars outside, suddenly aware of how thin and fragile those lights were, realizing they were nothing but candles in a storm too large to comprehend. And while they stood frozen between fear and disbelief, the archiver accessed a second hidden file, older than the first, older than most species in the council, revealing a forgotten digital book written not by a human commander but by the humans themselves during their last days in the galaxy. And the words inside it made everyone's hearts drop. "We do not fear death. We fear failing the galaxy." That single sentence broke the room's last piece of confidence, because it painted humans not as warriors seeking glory but as guardians carrying a burden no one else was strong enough to hold. And as the leaders read the next lines, which described monstrous entities made of shadows, void storms devouring planets, and silence that swallowed entire star clusters, their minds shook with terror as they finally realized why humans had trained, evolved, and vanished into the unknown. Because the universe was bigger than the council ever understood, and humanity had been fighting its darkest corners while everyone else slept peacefully under the false belief of safety. And as the archiver closed the book, a trembling diplomat finally asked the question that had been burning inside every heart. If humans fought this enemy and survived, then why are they running back to the galaxy? And the archiver, with a heavy voice and hollow eyes, replied, "Because they are not running. They are retreating to protect us. And whatever follows them is too powerful to face in the dark alone." And hearing these words sent waves of panic through every leader, because this meant the human fleet spotted by Rylos 17 was not an invasion force. It was a shield coming home before the storm broke, and the galaxy was not prepared. Its armies were weak, its leaders divided, its citizens unaware. And as the weight of this truth settled into the room, the only sound that filled the silence was the soft hum of the dark universe. Beyond the window, a hum that now felt alive, watching, waiting, inching closer with every heartbeat, leaving the council with one final terrifying thought. If humanity, the strongest warriors ever known, had returned with fear in their eyes, then the galaxy's darkest night was only beginning as fear spread across the galaxy like smoke escaping every crack. Distant observatories, old military stations, forgotten research towers, and even small civilian telescopes began reporting the same. Impossible vision. Massive shadows drifting through space, swallowing entire star fields behind them, moving with a slow cold grace that no known engine could produce. And as these reports piled up from every direction, panic rose inside the council chambers because the fleet the aliens had seen was no longer a rumor, no longer a glitch, no longer a misunderstanding. It was real, it was enormous, and it was getting closer, and the terrifying part was that none of the ships emitted heat, light, radiation, ion trails, or any form of detectable propulsion. They moved like ghosts sculpted from pure darkness, bending the starlight around their hulls as if space itself bowed to them. And while thousands of species watched these shadows appear on their broken screens, one horrifying truth settled into their minds. Humans did not return with the same technology they once had. They returned with something far beyond the galaxy's understanding. Something forged not in known space but in the horrors lying beyond the galaxy's borders. And as these monstrous triangular silhouettes drifted through the void, entire planets felt their gravity sensors shake, their satellites glitch, their power grids hum with unnatural static as if the universe was whispering warnings through their machinery. And on one research station, a scientist fainted when she realized the fleet was not traveling in normal space at all, but through some layer between dimensions, appearing and disappearing like shadows shifting under candlelight, never fully inside the physical universe, never fully outside it, as if they existed in two realities at once. And this discovery sent a cold wave through the council because technology like this should have taken millions of years to create, yet humans achieved it while the rest of the galaxy argued over border disputes and trade routes. And as the fleet crossed another star system, entire outposts shut down instantly, their systems failing, screens going black, alarms dying before they could sound, not because the humans attacked, but simply because their presence overloaded nearby electronics like a silent gravity storm made of pure power. And across multiple worlds, people gathered in the night sky, staring at the black shapes slowly revealing themselves as the fleet drew closer. Dark metallic monsters covered with long glowing blue lines that pulsed like veins, each pulse carrying some kind of ancient energy, something not mechanical, not digital, almost alive, and elders who remembered the old stories about humanity whispered in fear because they recognized those markings from ancient murals that showed humans fighting gods, beasts, and cosmic storms. And now those symbols were glowing on the hulls of human ships like warnings carved into the universe itself. And as the fleet's shadows fell across distant planets, the atmosphere of entire worlds changed. Winds slowed, oceans calmed, night animals hid, and nature stood still as if the very fabric of creation sensed the return of something powerful, something dangerous, something unstoppable. And deep inside the council's main observatory, a young analyst stared at the incoming fleet with tears in her eyes, whispering, "They are not coming to rule us. They are coming to protect something or hide something." And her voice trembled because she finally understood what the human commander meant in the recording. "If we return, the door has opened again." And as the fleet reached the edge of a major star cluster, all scanners, radars, and telescopes pointed toward the formation, desperate for a better look. But the moment the machines touched the fleet's boundary, everything collapsed. Satellites shut down, power grids failed, engines died, and every system across 5 sectors fell into darkness for 9 terrifying seconds. 9 seconds that felt like the entire galaxy was holding its breath, listening to the sound of its own fear, waiting for something to happen, something to emerge, something to break, and when the lights returned, when systems flickered back to life, when screens rebooted, the fleet had not moved an inch, but everyone who looked at it felt a weight on their chest, a pressure inside their souls, like an ancient warning engraved into their minds, and the Council realized something horrifying. The human fleet had not come to threaten. It had come to draw a line between the galaxy and something unspeakable, lurking in the dark beyond the stars, and as the fleet drifted closer, moving like silent giants, every leader, every soldier, every scientist, every child watching from their world felt the same chilling truth. Whatever humans had become, whatever they had faced, whatever they brought back with them, it was something far beyond the galaxy's imagination, and as the human flagship finally emerged fully into view, its hull scarred with marks that looked like claw wounds from creatures too big to exist, the galaxy understood one thing with absolute terror. The real enemy was not the fleet. The real enemy was still coming. Across the trembling galaxy, where fear now lived inside every star system, the Council desperately searched for a way to communicate with the approaching human fleet, believing that if they could send a peaceful envoy, maybe humanity would reveal their purpose, maybe they would explain why they returned after thousands of years, maybe they would calm the rising panic. But deep inside every leader's heart lived a silent fear. What if humans did not want to talk? What if they had seen something so terrifying that their only choice was silence, and that silence was the most frightening answer of all? Yet the Council still sent their finest diplomat ship, a small white vessel carrying ambassadors from 5 powerful species, each one trembling beneath their ceremonial robes as they traveled toward the silent human shadows drifting through the void like ancient gods awakening from their sleep. And as the diplomat ship crossed into the outer boundary of the fleet, every voice inside went quiet, every breath slowed, every heartbeat grew heavier, because the darkness around them did not feel empty anymore. It felt crowded, alive, aware, as if thousands of unseen eyes were staring at them from behind the black walls of space. And when the diplomat ship tried to broadcast a peaceful greeting, the message dissolved instantly, swallowed by static that felt unnatural, like something was canceling the sound before it even existed, and the ambassadors exchanged terrified glances, realizing the human fleet was not ignoring them. They were blocking them, controlling the very space around the transmission, bending communication like clay between their fingers, and the diplomat pilot's hands shook as he tried one last time to send a message of peace. But the moment he pressed the transmission key, the ship's lights dimmed and a wave of cold pressure rolled across the hull, as if something massive had passed right through them, and before the ambassadors could recover, a single human warship detached itself from the main fleet, drifting forward with a slow, terrifying grace, its angular black hull glowing with deep blue lines that pulsed like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant, each pulse sending a tremor through the diplomat ship's sensors, making them flicker and distort. And as the enormous human vessel stopped directly in front of them, dwarfing their tiny white ship like a mountain staring down at a grain of sand, every ambassador closed their eyes for a moment, gathering the courage to face the species they once believed extinct. But when the human warship finally activated its projection systems, something happened that no one in the galaxy had experienced for thousands of years. A human presence filled the air, silent at first, then growing into a towering hologram that materialized inside the diplomat ship, a figure taller than any alien in the room, wearing armor infused with glowing blue patterns that looked like starlight trapped inside metal. And the moment the ambassadors saw the human's face, sharp, calm, emotionless, eyes glowing with a mix of fatigue and something deeper, something older, something that carried the weight of galaxies, they felt their souls shake, because this human did not look like the humans of old stories. This human looked like someone who had seen nightmares, someone who had lived through storms so dark that the universe itself could not record them. And before the ambassadors could speak, the human raised a hand gently, as if silencing children, and an enormous wave of quiet filled the room. Not heavy, not violent, but ancient, powerful, impossible to resist. And then the human finally spoke, their voice echoing not like sound but like vibration inside the bones of everyone present. A voice that carried unimaginable distance, pain, and authority as they said, You seek answers. But answers are dangerous now. And the ambassadors trembled because the humans' tone held no anger, no hatred, only a sorrow deeper than space itself. And as the hologram flickered with faint distortions, the human continued, "Do not approach us again. Do not follow our path. Do not search for what lies beyond the outer void. We returned because the darkness followed. And if you interfere, you will awaken something you cannot survive." And these words slammed into the ambassadors like a cold wave of dread, because the human was not threatening them. Humans were warning them, protecting them, begging them to stay away from a danger so enormous that even the strongest warriors in history approached it with fear. And as the hologram's blue light dimmed, the human's final sentence carved itself deep into the hearts of every ambassador. "We stand between you and extinction. Do not make our burden heavier." And then, without a sound, without a flash, without any sign of departure, the hologram vanished as if it had never existed, leaving the diplomat ship floating in the dark with every ambassador frozen in shock, unable to speak, unable to breathe properly, each one realizing that they had just witnessed the return of a species that no longer needed ships, diplomacy, armies, or alliances because humans had evolved into something far more powerful, far more ancient, far more haunted. And as their ship began to reverse course automatically, forced by an invisible human command overriding their systems, they understood the terrifying truth. The human fleet did not come to negotiate, did not come to control, did not come to rule. They came to stand between the galaxy and the thing pursuing them, and whatever that thing was, if humans feared it, then the galaxy had no hope at all. Across the galaxy, panic spread faster than light, slipping into every home, every city, every star station, every military base, and even into the deepest underground bunkers where leaders once believed fear could not reach. But now fear lived everywhere, crawling under the skin of billions because the human envoy's warning, quiet, controlled, full of exhausted sorrow, echoed across the minds of every species like a nightmare replaying itself again and again. And as the diplomat ship returned in silence, its crew pale and shaking, the council listened to their report. With trembling hands, realizing that the humans had not threatened them at all, they had begged them to stay away, begged them to not interfere, begged them to let humanity stand alone against whatever hunted them. And that truth terrified the galaxy more than any weapon, because if humans, the most fearless warriors known to history, were afraid, then the galaxy had no hope of surviving what came next. And as rumors of the encounter spread, species who once saw themselves as powerful, like the Zarian Empire, the Jorith Dominion, the alien Triclans, suddenly felt like fragile insects waiting for a foot to descend upon them. And while military commanders activated their ancient war machines, pulling dusty weapons out of vaults sealed for centuries, none of it brought comfort because every weapon felt useless compared to the silent, monstrous fleet drifting through the darkness like a wall of shadows stretching beyond the horizon. And across civilian worlds, people gathered in streets, staring at the sky even though the human fleet was still far away, because everyone felt a strange pressure in the air, like the universe was holding its breath, waiting for something unimaginable to happen. And this pressure only grew stronger when thousands of communication channels across different sectors started failing at random, static flooding screens as if something massive was interfering with the fabric of space itself, and engineers trying to fix the systems reported the same terrifying phenomenon. Machines reacted not like they were malfunctioning, but like they were scared, flickering, freezing, shutting down in the presence of an overwhelming force, and soon even the bravest soldiers began refusing patrol duty, not out of disobedience but because each time they looked into the night sky, they felt a cold presence watching them, something that made their hearts race and their instincts scream. And as entire fleets tried to reorganize, forming defensive lines around their borders, they discovered something horrifying. Every time an alien warship tried to scan the human fleet, its systems collapsed instantly, shutting down like a candle blown out by a storm, making commanders realize that scanning the humans was impossible not because of a shield but because their ships were not fully inside this universe, traveling through some other layer that no species had ever touched. And this discovery shattered the last pieces of courage inside the council because if humans could move through different layers of reality, then their threat or their protection was far beyond anything the galaxy could ever match. And as their fear reached every corner of civilization, hundreds of empires attempted to send secret spy drones toward the human fleet, believing they could gather information. But each drone vanished before reaching the boundary, disappearing without sound, without explosion, without debris, as if swallowed by an invisible curtain that separated the human presence from the rest of existence, and this final failure sent a wave of raw panic across the galaxy because now it was clear. The humans were not allowing anyone near them, not because of hostility but because of fear that even approaching them might reveal the darkness they brought with them. And as this truth reached the Council's highest chambers, leaders argued, screamed, blamed one another, questioning whether the humans planned to abandon the galaxy or save it. But their arguments died instantly when the starfield behind the human fleet dimmed unnaturally, as if something enormous was blocking the starlight, something so large and so silent that entire constellations flickered like dying candles, and every telescope, every sensor, every watcher froze because whatever was hiding behind the human fleet was not moving like ships. It was moving like a colossal storm approaching, bending gravity, swallowing light, shaking the fabric of reality with each breath. And the worst part was that the human fleet shifted formation, not toward the galaxy, not toward invasion, but toward that monstrous darkness, forming a shield wall like warriors standing between a fragile home and an approaching nightmare. And as the galaxy watched this with millions of terrified eyes, a single horrifying realization settled over every mind. Humans were not preparing to attack. Humans were preparing to die protecting everyone else. Fighting an enemy the galaxy had no name for. No word for, no understanding of, and as the shadows behind the human fleet grew larger, pulsing like a giant heartbeat made of pure void, the galaxy understood why humanity had begged them not to follow. Because the darkness behind them was big enough to erase civilizations in seconds, big enough to drown star clusters, big enough to swallow time itself, and humans, broken, changed, evolved, scarred, were the only things standing between that cosmic monster and the rest of existence. Across the frightened galaxy, where every star now felt colder and every shadow looked deeper, the truth about humanity finally began to unravel like an ancient wound reopening. And as the Council replayed the diplomat recordings again and again, searching for some hidden meaning, some soft detail, some clue humans might have left behind, they suddenly noticed something they had overlooked before. A faint echo layered beneath the envoy's voice, a strange distortion that did not come from human technology, not from hologram instability, but from something older, something that vibrated like a distant growl behind the human's words. And when they isolated the sound, their hearts nearly stopped because it was not mechanical, not electrical, not natural. It was alive, a sound that should not exist inside any frequency their universe supported, a sound that came from beyond the cosmic border, a sound that humans had carried back with them like a scar. And as scientists worked to decode the faint echo, they realized it matched faint traces found in 3 dead star systems. Systems where entire planets had vanished without debris, without bodies, without anything left behind except silence. The same silence now spreading behind the human fleet like a shadow stretching across reality. And when this discovery reached the Council, panic erupted, leaders shouting, screaming, demanding answers, but the archiver, older than most empires, silenced the room with a single whisper because he had read something in the ancient Terran files, something so secret that only 2 beings in the galaxy ever knew, and he revealed that humans were never simply explorers or warriors. They were watchers, guardians placed in the oldest eras by something unknown, something the Council had erased from history because they were too afraid to accept their insignificance, and humans had been the only species willing to step into the darkness and face what others pretended did not exist. And the moment humanity vanished thousands of years ago, the galaxy celebrated, thinking the dangerous species was gone. But they never understood humanity did not run from the galaxy. They ran toward the monster the galaxy refused to see, toward the outer void where stars screamed before dying, toward regions where time twisted like liquid, and as the archiver spoke, every leader felt the floor fall from beneath their confidence. Because the Terran files revealed that humans had discovered the existence of an ancient enemy long before any species developed advanced technology. An enemy older than galaxies, older than light, older than the concept of life itself. A presence that moved like a living storm through the universe, devouring civilizations so completely that even memory of them vanished, and humans fought this enemy alone, in silence, across thousands of forgotten battles, far beyond the maps of any star chart. And every scar on their ships, every glow in their armor, every change in their technology was not evolution. It was survival. forced by a war that no one else was strong enough to fight. And as the archiver revealed that humans had sent their last distress call centuries ago, a call the galaxy ignored because they dismissed it as a cosmic anomaly, the Council felt the weight of guilt crush their chests, because the final line of that forgotten distress message said, "We will hold the line. Do not come for us." The same message now being repeated, the same message the envoy had spoken with tired eyes and a voice that carried galaxies of sorrow, and the reason became terrifyingly clear. Humans were not protecting the galaxy from an enemy. Humans were protecting the galaxy from the truth that the enemy was already here, already awake, already moving, and the human fleet's return was not a victory march, not a triumphant return of warriors, but a desperate retreat of soldiers who had fought too long, seen too much, suffered beyond imagination, and were now trying to stand between the galaxy and the nightmare that followed them home. And as the leaders listened to this truth in suffocating silence, they realized why the humans looked different, why their armor glowed with unnatural light, why their voices carried an echo. Because humanity was no longer a simple species, they were forged into something else by the darkness they had battled, shaped by survival into beings who existed half in this universe and half in the other, guardians scarred by places no alien mind could imagine. And when the archiver whispered the final line from the Terran archives, "If we fall, the galaxy falls with us," a cold, crushing fear spread through the hearts of every leader because the distant shadow behind the human fleet pulsed again, growing larger, darker, hungrier, shaking the stars with each silent beat, and for the first time in thousands of years, the entire galaxy understood what humans had become, what they represented, what their silence meant. Humanity was the last wall, and that wall was cracking under the weight of something too monstrous for any star to survive. Across the trembling galaxy, where even the brightest stars felt dim and every heart beat in quiet terror, the human fleet held its silent formation like an ancient wall standing against the approaching storm, and as the unknown darkness behind them grew larger, pulsing with slow, monstrous breaths that made entire constellations flicker, every species realized the horrifying truth. Whatever humanity had been fighting for thousands of years was no longer far away, no longer trapped in some forgotten corner of existence. It had followed them home, crossing the unimaginable void to reach the galaxy that never believed in it. And while the Council watched with dry mouths and shaking hands, the starfield directly behind the human fleet began to warp, bending like liquid metal heated by fire, twisting reality into shapes that should not exist, and a cold wave washed through the minds of every being alive, an instinct older than evolution whispering run, hide, escape, but no one could move, no one could breathe properly, because what crawled out of that warped space was not a creature, not a fleet, not a weapon. It was a shadow made of nothingness, a living absence of light, a darkness so deep that it erased starlight the moment it touched it, swallowing entire clusters without sound, leaving behind empty black holes that pulsed like open wounds, and the galaxy watched in silent horror as the human flagship drifted forward, placing itself directly between the darkness and all known life, its glowing blue lines brightening like veins carrying the last strength of a dying giant. And suddenly the human ships activated something no one had ever seen before. A shimmering barrier of light rising from their hulls, stretching across the void in a curved wall, trembling under its own power, glowing with the energy of countless battles fought in forgotten universes. And as this barrier expanded, the galaxy felt its force like an invisible wind pressing against their souls. A wind carrying echoes of screams, roars, and ancient dying stars. The memory of wars so devastating that no alien mind could survive witnessing them. And while every species trembled before this impossible sight, the human envoy reappeared, projecting into the sky above the council chamber without permission, without request, without effort. Their tall, armored figure flickering with cold blue fire as if they were standing half in reality and half outside it. Their eyes hollow with exhaustion, their voice shaking with a mix of sorrow and determination as they spoke. "We cannot hold it back forever." And the council members froze like statues because the envoy was no longer calm, no longer composed. Their voice carried fear, real fear, something no one ever expected to hear from a human. And the envoy continued, "You must not interfere. You must not send ships. You must not search for us. This is not your fight. If you come near the boundary, it will notice you." And as those words echoed through the galaxy, Everyone felt something cold brush against their minds, a faint whisper made of hunger, curiosity, rage, and emptiness. A whisper that did not belong to any living creature. And the envoy's face hardened as they sensed it too, their armor pulsing with brighter blue light as they forced their voice to remain steady. If we fail, there will be no warnings left. No survivors. No galaxies to hide in. And before anyone could beg, question, or plead for answers, the envoy turned its head slowly toward the dark horizon behind their fleet, their expression tightening as if they felt the universe itself bending under the weight of the approaching horror, and with a voice cracked by pain, they whispered, "It is almost here." And then the projection vanished instantly, leaving the entire galaxy shaking in suffocating silence. And at that exact moment, the monstrous shadow behind the human fleet surged forward, its pulse shaking planets, splitting asteroids, warping starlight, and the human fleet responded immediately, their ships locking into a final formation that looked less like a military strategy and more like a ritual they had repeated countless times in the outer void. A ritual of sacrifice, a ritual of last stands, a ritual of warriors who knew the only ending waiting for them was death. And as the barrier of light brightened to blinding white, the first collision between humanity and the cosmic darkness began, sending silent shockwaves across the entire galaxy, shaking worlds, trembling oceans, rattling mountains, making every breathing creature instinctively fall to their knees, eyes filled with tears they could not understand, their souls screaming with the knowledge that something too big, too ancient, too horrifying was being held back by human hands alone. And as the battle ignited with no sound, no fire, no blasts, only pure distortions of reality itself, the last thing the galaxy saw before the human fleet disappeared into the blinding void was a single message broadcast across every star system. Written in ancient Terran code, simple, direct, and filled with unimaginable pain. "Do not come. If we fall, run." And then the screens went black. Space went quiet. The stars dimmed. And the fate of humanity, and the survival of the galaxy, became a question hanging in the frozen silence of a universe too afraid to breathe.